Welcome to a First Perspective Live. I am so excited because today I have a wonderful guest who I'm going to introduce, but I do want to let you know that we're going to be talking about the New King James Version as well as the New English Translation, the NET. And in honor of that, I have some Bibles that I plan to give away today. And so stay tuned as we get into our conversation. I'll take some time to let everybody know how you can enter for a chance to win one of these Bibles, which I love to do when we talk about different translations, to do a Bible giveaway related to that translation. So my guest today is an expert on these translations, or he's definitely someone who's in the know because he is the vice president and Thomas Nelson Bible publisher at HarperCollins Christian Publishing. Philip Nation, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Yes, the title is a mouthful, that is for sure. So.
I totally remember. No, I read off the screen here.
I'm a little insulted that you didn't get Reverend Doctor on the front end of all of that.
Yeah. Well, is that your other title?
That is my other title. I do have a doctorate, and I am ordained and have served as a pastor for many years. Still do a lot of preaching.
Well, that's great, and I'm going to ask you about what you're doing with the publishing. But yeah, you really wear different hats. And one thing I wanted to tell the audience about you that I think is really remarkable is, and this is going to sound like an oxymoron, but
Oh.
Philip has a truly refreshing Twitter X account. I mean that, like, because so much on Twitter is just it's so hard to take in. But your account, whenever I see your tweets, they're just it's just such wonderful things that you put out on Twitter.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it can be a bit of a pigsty on Twitter/X. And I decided some time ago that I was just not going to contribute. There are things I want to say and that I want to post that I just decide it's not worth how can I put it, the pixelated pugilism. It's just not worth it. And so I decided a long time ago to try to be an encouraging presence. And then when the zombie apocalypse happened of COVID, I specifically for pastors, I saw a lot of pastors just barely hanging on. And so that's when I was like, I'm going all in on, I want to be an encouraging force to believers as in total, but to ministers and pastors in particular. So yes, I try to elevate the conversation and encourage people along the way.
Well, I think it's quite a feat to be able to do that on that platform. I keep calling it Twitter. It's technically X now, and like we said, there's just so much negativity. But yeah, you really are a blessing in that way. But I think it says something about you, your pastor heart, and it's amazing that you have this job working as a Bible publisher. And we cannot wait to talk about. I have questions which we'll go through about a couple of these translations, but also in the audience as we go along. If you have a question, we'll try to address some audience questions too. Try to keep them on topic. We do want to really focus today on the New King James, and not necessarily like controversy about Bible translations in general, but just questions that are related to the New King James, NET, specifics about those translations and the editions that are being printed, which we'll talk about. But let me just say, the audience already here letting us know where they're from. We got West Virginia here. Jason, good to see you. Alan from St. Louis. And I know these are some people that watch whenever we have a program, so great to see you all here. We got Tennessee, and I guess, Philip, you know something about Tennessee, right? Isn't that where you are?
I do know a fair amount about Tennessee. Yeah, I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee, and that's where headquarters of the company is. And but then I've got my older son and his family live in Nashville, And then my younger son and his family live in Omaha, Nebraska. So I spend a lot of time because I have a granddaughter and they're expecting their second, and so a grandson in a few months. And so I spend a lot of time in the Midwest now.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, you really travel to different places. And speaking of different places, we've got someone from Australia
Oh,
in the
wow.
comments here. Trevor, good to see you. I guess this is actually a good time to do this program. We're in the morning Eastern time where I am, Central time where Philip is, and so people even out in Australia are able to watch this one. It's hard with time zones to please everybody, but
Indeed.
yeah, I mean we got people from all over. Okay, now Wonton Disciple, great channel by the way, does Bible reviews, but I don't actually know where he's located. He says y'all, so maybe that's something southern there. I'm not sure
Well,
where he is. Then we got Texas here. Always great to see Texas represented. So great, yeah. And then hey, this is cool. Got Wayne from Ontario, and I'm going to be headed to Canada next week or later this week. No, next week. Yes, I forget what day it is. Yeah, I should be there later next week in Toronto. So there you go. Great. We got Canada here. All right, so I see there's other people too, but I just wanted to give some quick shout outs. Also, another thing as we get into this conversation, please let me know if the sound levels are okay. I think Philip is coming through real nice and strong, but if our levels aren't matching well, I like to know that because I can always adjust my volume and try to get them matching. I don't want anybody to have a hard time hearing both of us. All right, with that, I will get to talking about the Bible giveaway, which I mentioned earlier. I want to give people a chance to keep coming in, though, and for everybody here to hear how to enter for that. But let me start asking some questions here for Philip. And the first one is just to talk a little bit more about the publishing job that you have. As I mentioned earlier in the introduction, you're vice president and Thomas Nelson Bible publisher. So what exactly is that?
So what does that mean? I get that question a lot when somebody asks, well, what do you do for a living? Oftentimes I'll just say, I work in publishing. And then when they start pressing and I start explaining you have to go down the rabbit hole. So the work of a Bible publisher, oftentimes people think that I'm sitting around making translation decisions all day long, or I'm editing, the ancillary material. And that's really not what I do. So, being a part of HarperCollins Publishing, we're a big for-profit publisher, and so I run a business unit. All of my training is theological. I have an MDiv, I have a doctorate, and so all of my training is theological, but I have learned to be a businessman. And on our team, I've got a set of editors. I have a set of a group called Managing Ed, that they're kind of the project managers, and then a group of marketers. Many people, if you have visited the Thomas Nelson Bible's Facebook page, you have seen my colleague Nikki Getman. She's the VP for us of marketing at Thomas Nelson, and then there's a lot of cross-functional teams for the typesetters and the production and the art designers who design our covers and our packaging. And so on a monthly kind of basis, my work will go from the deep dive of all the business metrics of how are our sales doing and looking at budgets and the P&L, sheet, to inventory management, uh, negotiating contracts and overseeing that process. But then I stay deeply engaged with our editorial team. And there are times when I get to do long reviews of study notes and ancillary materials, although that's not real common. But I do whenever there's a really touchy kind of subject that they need additional help of making a decision about ancillary content, that they need somebody to make a decision about, then they'll bring those things to me. But so I help to visioneer the pipeline forward. What are the future editions that we're going to have? I get to set all of those things. I get to interact with our sales team about how well things will do in the marketplace. What are people looking for, needing in Bible editions? And then it's, like I said, it's the deep dive into lots of Excel spreadsheets to keep up with inventory and all of the profit and loss statements.
Yeah. So you do a lot of just a lot of different things really in that capacity, but it's a lot of keeping track of different things. And I think a question that I'm already kind of seeing in the comments just has to do with the structure now, because Thomas Nelson used to be its own thing.
Right.
Now it's under HarperCollins. Some people have concerns when they see HarperCollins because they just think of this big secular company. How does that work? Because you actually still are a Christian publisher,
Yeah.
right? So how does that work? I mean, do you feel like still the Christian publishing can stay true to its mission, and how do you make sure to do that?
Yeah. So you're right. Thomas Nelson is a company that's over 200 years old, was founded originally in London, England, and then slowly migrated to having its headquarters in the US. And then some number of years ago, HarperCollins bought Zondervan Christian Publishing, and then 9 or 10 or 11 years later acquired Thomas Nelson. And so we make up the bulk of the Christian publishing division of HarperCollins. But yes, we're a Christian publishing division where our mission statement is that, we want to promote biblical principles and honor Jesus Christ with everything that we publish. And for people who have some kind of hesitation about, well, you're owned by this big company that is not a Christian company in its DNA and in its makeup, I can just say this. Never once during my almost 5 years of serving as the Bible publisher for Thomas Nelson, never once has anybody from New York City, where HarperCollins, headquarters is, has called us up and said, "Hey, you can't publish that," or "Hey, we need you to change that," or have tried to somehow manipulate our content of ancillary material. In fact, they're incredibly supportive of the Bible business, and they're very happy to have the Bible business as a part of the company. And so we have our own CEO. His name's Mark, for the Christian division, who there's a bunch of then CEOs of different divisions that all answer up to the CEO of HarperCollins. But for those who have worries about that, I would want to alleviate those worries. That we operate by Christian principles. We are a bunch of Christians working in a publishing company that is publishing Christian materials. So we're happy to serve the whole church that way.
So HarperCollins is not twisting your arm to change things or do things in a different way than you normally would.
No, they're not at all. And that was one of the questions I had when I started being interviewed for the position is, okay, so what's the relationship between the headquarters in Nashville and the corporate headquarters in New York City? And I've been pleasantly surprised, and I have to interact with folks in New York City on a somewhat regular basis, and they're always very supportive. They don't often understand what's going on in the Bible business because it's a different kind of publishing, business than anything else. And so sometimes it's like, okay, well, let me describe what's going on because I need help on this, on these logistics. But they're very supportive of what we're doing.
My observation too is that in the times that we live in today, that this is, for better or for worse, this is how things are. And actually, I perceive that it's really mutually beneficial the way that things are set up, because in reality, you're still staying true to your mission as a Christian Bible publisher, but the resources at your disposal are just so great being part of HarperCollins. That's the impression I get. So that must be helpful to you as a publisher.
Oh, absolutely. I would say that it is one of the incredible benefits. I have worked at a different Christian publishing company in the past. Like we were talking earlier, my my training is all in theology. So I've served as a pastor and a church planter. And then there was a season of time where I worked at one of the big nonprofit Christian publishing houses, Lifeway. And there are differences there between nonprofit and for profit, but then being a part of a global, kind of multinational, very large publishing entity, it gives us an advantages I never knew before when it comes to production and the assimilation of data about how can we best serve readers out there. So yeah, there are huge advantages.
That's great. Yeah, and that's, again, it's been my observation, because when I look at the editions, there's just such a variety, and it seems like you're able to even find printers in all different places, and just, you just have so many options at your disposal. And I guess for you, that's what you do. That in some ways that's got to be a lot to deal with. Trying to figure out where you're going to resource different materials for your Bibles and how they're going to be designed.
But it's a huge amount of fun. I get the best mail because I get Bibles, and we get what are referred to as production dummies. And so when we're designing a new Bible, and it's going to have this material for the cover, and it's going to have this many pages, and this is what's going to be stamped on the cover, and this is the kind of paper that's going to be used, and it's going to be gilded edges. Well, the printers that we have bidded out to and that have won the job, they'll make up production dummies that it's the exact number of pages, but they're all blank. And then it's bound up in the way that we've ordered it, and they send us those production dummies for us to do a quality check to make sure that yes, it's the right kind of leather soft or genuine leather, the hardcover is printed right, everything's bound right. And then over here on my floor, I have this box of all the leather swatches and bonded leather swatches and the leather soft swatches. And so some days it's a lot of fun getting to decide, okay, which shade of burgundy is material are we going to use on this Bible? Which shade of brown leather are we going to use? Like, is it going to be silver gilding or gold gilding? And so working with our art designers on all of those details and embellishments, that's a lot of fun for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then as Bible reviewers, we get to see the choices you made and then give our feedback, and hopefully we don't offend you too much.
Feedback is a very kind way of putting what some people have done to us. But no, the Bible review community is generally very positive and very encouraging, because you guys and gals want people to find a Bible, to get a Bible that they're going to feel comfortable with digging into. And so for that, I'm really appreciative of what you do and what your colleagues who do similar work, what they're accomplishing.
Yeah, I think it's great. And, we all have our place in it, but I never intended, I didn't set out to be a Bible reviewer, but it's just, I do love Bibles and I treasure them. And I found in today's world where people can't go to the bookstore as easily, it's not as easy to pick up physical copies. It's really useful for people to have these online reviews. So let's talk about the New King James Version some here. That's what people are chomping at the bit, I'm sure, to talk about, because I've already seen some discussion. And what would you say is the goal of the publisher in regard to the New King James Version at this point in time?
Yeah, so having the role of stewarding a translation, not something that was on my list earlier in life of what I would get to do, but I'm happy to do it. So my goal is the preservation and the continued growth of readership of the New King James Version, and to honor what the translation committee set out to do. I don't see it as my role to try to redo what they did or to fix what they did. My role is, there was a translation committee that was commissioned in the late 70s by Thomas Nelson to accomplish this translation. They did. And so then I'm supposed to steward this into the future. And so my goal is to build the readership of it, and to ensure that anytime every once in a while we find where there is a typo. That happens. The Bible is about 750,000 words in length. And so part of the work that we do is to make sure that we keep the purity of what the translation committee offered up and what they accomplished, and to ensure that anything that happens in the future is stays in line with what the translation committee accomplished.
So preserving the good work that was done and then trying to increase readership of that translation are basically that's what you're trying to do.
It is, because I would think that a lot of people that are watching this are aware that there are different translation philosophies, and then of course there are different text bases, specifically for the New Testament, for the Greek New Testament, and so the translation committee chose the Textus Receptus for the New Testament, and then their translation philosophy was this complete equivalence. Every translation committee comes up with their own phrase to describe what it is that they're trying to accomplish at the moment. And so that idea of complete equivalence, of delivering the complete idea of the words and phrases in a beautiful form, I think is a very honorable and type of desire. And so we want to keep that, as I said, preserved for the future.
That's great. It makes me think of how hard the initial advertisers of the New King James went when they first put it out. They use that term complete equivalence, which you mentioned, which is like, this is the most equivalent you can get. And then I think some of their boxes said the accurate one. It's like,
yes.
Out of all the translations, this is the accurate one.
Yeah, no one would be surprised that as the guy who becomes the publisher of Thomas Nelson Bibles, I have started collecting older editions, and so I've got some of the first run print of the NKJV New Testament, which came out first, and then the entire canon that was released in '82. I've got some of those, and yes, I have some of those boxes where there was that stamp on the front where it was printed on there, the accurate one, accurate in really large font size. So I was like, well, good on them. They believed for the work that they had done.
That's great. Yes. Yeah. Well, the big question that everybody is already starting to ask, it has to do with update.
I've seen it scrolling through.
Yeah, and people already giving their opinions. So, with these goals you mentioned, will the New King James be updated in our lifetimes? That's how I would ask it, because of course maybe 100 years from now, but will it be updated in our lifetimes? And I'm seeing here, kind of along with that, what about the notes? Would they ever be updated, as far as you know?
Yeah, so the quick answer is there are no plans on the table right now to update the translation. We've heard very clearly from the avid readers of the New King James, and we also, in looking at the landscape of translations, we think that one of the great strengths of the New King James is its stability, that it is a solid translation. It was a solid translation when it was released in 1982. We have not perceived, my predecessors as the publishers of Nelson Bibles and me now sitting in the role, we've not perceived any egregious errors for which we need to go in and do mass revisions. And so that is just simply not something that we're considering at the moment. The issue of the translator notes, that has been a question that has been asked, I think, of myself and the three previous publishers of Nelson Bibles is, will you ever update the notes? And I think the answer to that is more likely. And as we begin to approach the big anniversary milestones for the translation, I think that would be more of a possibility than trying to update the whole translation. But again, I'll say there's no group of academics that have been assembled to do that work. But it is something that particular idea of updating the translator notes is something that I and our associate publisher, his name is Brian Dembozic, and our VP of marketing, as I've mentioned earlier, Nikki Getman, and our senior managing editor, Lisa Lester. That's something that the four of us, we keep on the table, and we periodically revisit about, should we do this? When would we do this? But I would want all of my friends in the chat to know that it's a massive undertaking. That is a very large undertaking that would take a few years to accomplish. I don't even want to begin to speculate publicly of the financial commitment that it would require to do that. But I think the translation, we don't have any plans to assemble a group to revise the translation, but we are open if we gain the academic reasoning to do an update of the translator notes, that there's a massive need to do that, then we're open to keep that conversation going internally and then to extend that out to actual work.
Yeah.
There you go. So everybody wanted to know. So there it is.
That's probably the best answer that you could have given from my take on just, kind of what the overall feedback has been, because people on the whole don't seem to want to see the text updated. Yeah. But like you said, you're not really considering that right now. No. But the notes people are more open to, and you are considering that, even though there's no real plan set in place. So for everybody who wanted to know, that's the current answer right now as to the there's not going to be any updating of the NKJV in the near future. Okay, so with that, let me put up here how people can enter for a chance to win a New King James Version. If you want to enter for one of these New King James Bibles that I have here, just write NKJV Bible in the subject line, email afreshperspective@gmail.com. I also have one NET Bible called the Text NET Bible. Great. Yeah. So this is another Bible that's available. We'll talk a little bit about the NET today, but you just write NET Bible in the subject line if you want to enter for this. If you really are interested in either one, you could put both translations in the subject line, and that will enter you for a chance to win one of those Bibles. And I will let a week from now everyone know. So as we're recording this, next week would be June 28th, 2024. And I'll let everybody know on a community post in YouTube and on Facebook who has won those Bibles. Okay, so with that, we'll continue talking about the New King James. So I guess really interesting question to ask from your perspective. You're kind of able to see how much it's being used and who's using it, how they're using it. So why would you say that the New King James Bible is popular and it continues to be used so much, and who is it that's really using it from what you're seeing?
Yeah, and so the two different sections there is, why is it so popular and who's using it? The why is it popular? I think that it's popular because oftentimes I'll say the New King James Version feels like home. Now, I have the advantage that I was raised in a Christian home and was in church from a young age and all of my life, and so some of that is for me personally, this sounds almost a little silly, but it sounds like the Bible. It
That's right.
feels like you're reading the Bible when you read it, and that's not to dog other translations that operate on a more dynamic translation theory. But the New King James, its retention of theological language like propitiation and sanctification, its retention of those kind of biblical vocabulary, uh, that it swims in that stream upstream from the King James without as many archaisms, archaic terms. And so there's a popularity there because people feel that there's a bit of majestic language, that there's weight to it while still being readable, and it being a translation of modern language. And so I think that is why it's popular, is simply those kind of, it balances that readability with the retention of historical biblical vocabulary, Bible vocabulary in the English tongue. Now, the Who, one of the wonderful things about getting to steward the NKJV is that the Who is a really wide,
Yeah.
swath of Christianity. It is, you get, like, if we start talking about traditions and denominations and networks, we publish the Orthodox Study Bible, for the
Wow.
Orthodox Church
Yeah.
that utilizes the New King James translation as the New Testament of that study Bible. But then also you've got historically African American denominations where it is a dominant translation. You go out to the West Coast and the Calvary Chapel movement of churches, there are a lot of folks there that use the New King James as their primary translation for preaching and reading and studying and church use. And then it has a great history within the Southern Baptist Convention, within the Assemblies of God. And so there's a lot of different traditions, from the Orthodox to the Pentecostal to Bible churches, that you see the New King James pop up a lot. And it does provide a translation that helps people who maybe are unchurched and they think the only Bible that is available is a King James version, and they're intimidated by that. And it provides for them a translation that it's like, oh, again, to use this maybe silly phrase, it sounds like the Bible. Oh, that sounds like the Bible. But it's not quite as intimidating in its vocabulary. So
Yeah.
it's a really wide swath of Bible readers who utilize it, from the academics, some seminary professors that I know, and seminary presidents, to everyday Bible readers.
Yeah. That's a great point you're making, because one of the things that I think it's lacking today is a universality of Bible translation, that a translation that people from all different backgrounds use, because we do tend to break down into silos,
Yeah.
even in the Christian world, and you have this group likes to use this translator, but yeah, the New King James in many ways transcends a lot of that. So one of the questions as we think about all this is the translation philosophy, which you mentioned before, because it is its own kind of translation philosophy. And the question is, could you speak to that translation philosophy and how that fits into the landscape of translations that are out there today, just so people kind of have a sense as to, like, okay, what is it about the translation philosophy of the New King James that's worth me having on the shelf and utilizing in my life?
Yeah. So there is, and if you start Googling this, you'll find numerous images of translation spectrums that different people have come up with, and tried to gauge where do Bibles fall on this spectrum. But essentially, the thing to know is that on one side of the spectrum is a formal translation philosophy, and on the other side of the spectrum is the dynamic. And a lot of times people will say, they're looking for a literal Bible. Well, trust me, you don't want a literal Bible. That if you're looking for a literal Bible, you need Hebrew. You need to be able to read Hebrew and Greek. And they often, and so kind of the layman's term is that it's a word for word translation, but essentially you're talking about a formal type of translation, that is, you're translating every single word out of the original languages, but you still have to change the word order because both Hebrew and Greek structure their sentences different than we do in English. And so you would get very formal translation on one side, which we sometimes in a layman's kind of term say word for word. And then the dynamic side of the spectrum is more of the thought for thought or phrase by phrase, where you're translating ideas at a time, and you're not as concerned about translating every single word precisely. And so some translation committees want to be on one side of the spectrum or the other for good reasons. And then lots of others, because there are, since the Bible has been translated into English, I've seen the largest number is that there have been 900 translations in English since the Geneva Bible in the 1500s. In our modern time, I mean, we could say that there's 100. Let's just say there's 100 translations, and maybe there's 5 or more that are at the extreme ends of the spectrum, and then everybody else is somewhere in the middle, and some translations want to be dead center. And so the translation philosophy of the complete equivalence that the NKJV translation committee used is they wanted to be on the formal half of the spectrum, but still centrist to it, still trending to the center point, because they wanted to still prioritize readability and beauty, which is why in the New King James, if you open up a New King James version to the Psalms or any poetry in the Bible, you'll see it typeset like modern poetry, in order to make it more readable. And so some of it is accomplished by the actual translation of the words, and then other times it's it's accomplished by the actual typesetting to make it more readable and to give it the feel of that genre. And so the New King James translators wanted to be on that formal side of the spectrum, but to trend toward the center point where they could. And so obviously I think that they accomplished a great balance there. I'll let my bias be on display for everybody about that, though.
Well, you should be biased toward it. I mean, but it's a bias, that has a lot of good arguments in favor of it, for sure. I mean, I've used the New King James, and it's one of the top translations, probably my top 2 that I recommend on this channel. I think the New King James, and I'm seeing it in the comments, it just retains so much of the strengths of the King James in terms of literary quality. I think we lost Philip there just now. But yeah, the New King James retains a literary quality to it that you see with the King James Version. And hopefully we'll get Philip back here soon. And just to make sure, because he did cut out there, can everybody still hear me right now? And we'll hopefully get him back in a few seconds here. So just let me know in the comment section if you can still hear me. I'm still seeing comments about the conversation we're having, but all right, here we go.
Here we are.
Was that you or me? I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. Are you still there? We keep losing him. Well, I hope that we can get him back, because this has been a really good conversation. And audience, I thank you so much for sticking with us. And I do see people, I think, still hear me. So hopefully you'll be able to hear Philip in a few minutes. I think we got a lot of the important questions answered, which had to do with the update, which they're not planning to update the New King James Version in the near future. So if anybody had a question about that, Yeah, Nicholsworth says here that Philip said, "I'm out." I don't think that was the case. Are you still there, Philip? Can you hear me?
I am. Can you hear
All
me?
right. Okay, you're back. Yeah. So
Sorry
just
about
just
that.
no problem. I'm just going to continue with what I was saying. The New King James Version really retains the literary quality of the King James Version, but also the King James writers themselves were not bound to being overly literal. They did care about beauty and literary quality. In the New King James, one example that comes to mind, and I'll get to Nichols' comment off here. Forgot to do that. One example is I think it's in 1 Corinthians 1 where Paul says the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. And I like that the New King James is willing to translate logos as the message of the cross. I have no problem with translations that say the word of the cross, but I think that's just a good example where the New King James translators were saying, okay, what is really going to hit home?
Right.
What's going to, and it's the message of the cross. I think that's just a choice they made there that is reflective of their translation philosophy of complete equivalence.
Yeah, and that's I think that really is it, and that's why they chose that phrase "complete equivalence" is
Yeah.
because in places like that they said this particular choice of English translation will give us the complete idea that is here inside of the Greek language because that's a phrase that is loaded up with meaning, and so here's the idea.
Yeah. Now, I want to hear your inside scoop as best you can on,
Oh no.
what what are additions that our people are really interested right now in purchasing and utilizing from what you're seeing. I'm just interested. I'm curious to know what are some of the most sold editions of the New King James right now.
Yeah, people ask this question, so I'm happy to talk about that because there are those editions that are just text and reference Bibles, and then there are the editions that are the note-driven Bibles. We often say study Bibles, but it also includes devotional Bibles and daily Bibles, where there's a different order to the given to the scriptures. Right now, one of the best selling Bibles we have is the personal size, large print, end of verse reference Bible,
Wow.
where
Yeah.
it's a verse by verse formatting. So it's not because you can buy the NKJV in both paragraph formatted and verse by verse format. And this one text and reference Bible, and it comes in covers that are brown, black, purple, pink, and yeah, I think those four. And then there's a leather edition. That's been a really popular, just kind of everyday. It's got a great font size. Then in terms of study Bibles, the Woman's Study Bible has just perennially done really great. The MacArthur Study Bible from this struggling pastor of a small church out on the West Coast, John MacArthur, barely known. His Bible, over the decades has continued to sell really well. The New King James Study Bible, which is a translation-based study Bible. Most translations have one of those, so there's
Mm.
a King James Version Study Bible, a New King James Study Bible. There's an NIV Study Bible. Other translations have those as well.
Mm.
But the NKJV Study Bible is just a solid resource. And then I would say one other, if I could add in one other, probably one that has come out of the gate, I think fairly strong, is the Evangelical Study Bible.
Hmm.
That was the general editor is the late Dr. Ed Hindson, who had been at Liberty University as the dean of their School of Religion for many, many, many years. And the Bible, he actually passed away before he had completed all of his work. And then we lost him, so he graduated to heaven, and so. But that Bible seems to be going very well in the marketplace.
Okay. So what you're basically saying is the end of verse reference Bible, which doesn't surprise me. A lot of New King James readers love that verse by verse classic
Yeah,
format. And then the study Bibles, which of course people want to understand what they're reading, and those study Bibles provide a lot of helpful aids.
yeah.
Now, you brought it up, so I kind of feel like
Okay.
I'm going to just ask, am I correct in saying that the MacArthur Study Bible is going to be produced in the Legacy Standard Bible version
You are
pretty
correct. Yeah.
soon?
Yeah. So before the end of the year, I can't remember right off the top of my head. It's October or November one of those months. Yes, we talked to Dr. MacArthur and to his team, and they asked, and so we
Yeah.
said yes, and so yes, there it is releasing in the Legacy Standard Bible edition. So the MacArthur Study Bible is available in New King James, ESV, NASB 95, and now in the Legacy Standard Bible before the end of the year. So I
Yeah.
suspect that's going to be very, very popular amongst those who follow him closely and
Yeah.
read all of his stuff.
Yeah. And speaking of formal equivalents, the LSB is really becoming the poster child for a very formal equivalent
Yeah,
type translation.
a very formal translation because
Yeah.
it's in that family
Yeah.
of translations with the New American Standard Bible.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Now, what about you? Are there any current or coming editions of the New King James that you're excited about that you thought would be good to
Yeah,
talk about?
one of the more recent editions that we released that I have been really really pleased with. It's called the Prayer Bible, and it is a simple text Bible with wide margins of the New King James. That for every chapter of the Bible there is a prayer prompt. So it's not a
Hmm.
prayer that you pray, but rather it's a prompt of, okay, now that you've read this chapter, what is an idea, what are the ideas here that would help to guide you, what are the biblical principles here that could guide your prayers for this moment. And that idea came out of a Bible that we released back in 2020 called the Abide Bible, which was all based around devotional prompts, and praying scripture is one of them. So we decided, well, let's just do a Bible that is that.
Hmm.
And I think it's a really helpful addition. And for people who like to also make notes, there's margin space to do that as well. And so that's just a really simple idea, but a really great one. One that is coming out later this year, it's called the Life in Christ Bible. And so for people who are wanting to study more deeply about what is our identity in Christ, what does it look like to be a human? You know, what's the imago Dei, the image of God within us? How do we grow up in our faith? How do you how do you continue to progress forward? That's one that's coming out. I believe it's in September, that I think is going to be a really helpful addition for people.
Okay. So, one thing along with what you're saying here, this is actually my brother in the comments, so I'm gonna put him right up on the screen here. Good to see Alan. He was thinking about an NKJV that had notes and commentary by all the best theologians. So is there any kind of church history NKJV that has ever been out?
We don't have one out. There was one kind of similar to this, but it used voices of the church all the way up through the 20th century. Uh,
Hmm.
and so we recently released one in the net translation, the New English translation, called the Timeless Truths Bible. And
Hmm.
so it's been in that translation where there is commentary for every chapter of the Bible from noted figures of church history up through the 19th century, but a lot of early church fathers. But I will say we do have something in the works that I think is along the line of what Alan is asking of uh, early church history, commentary from early church history. So that is something that we're working on at the moment.
Okay. And then you mentioned a prayer Bible.
Hmm.
something that's focused on prayer. And you said, is it the Imago Dei Bible, or did I hear that wrong?
It's the Life in Christ
Oh,
Bible.
the Life in Christ Bible. I'm sorry. Yes.
No,
Okay.
that stuck
Life in
with me.
Christ
I
Bible.
get that.
All right. So, great. Well, we should shift now in the time we have left to the NET a little bit.
Yeah.
The NET is the New English Translation and has an interesting history to it because it wasn't initially produced by Thomas Nelson. It was different translators, and I think it's like the first translation maybe that really made a lot of use of the internet
Yeah.
back right at the end, kind of the turn of the millennium.
Yeah.
But then Thomas Nelson got a hold of it. So why did Thomas Nelson acquire the NET or start producing it? Maybe I should say.
Yeah. So yes, that's correct. We did not acquire it. It's still the copyright holders are Biblical
That's right.
Studies Press, and we are the commercial licensees and
I see.
licensor for it.
Hmm.
And so we're doing all of the commercial publishing of it into the marketplace. But you're right, it began with actually a businessman who very tech savvy before people were being tech savvy, and he wanted to make sure that there was a Bible for free out on the internet that
Mm.
people could access and use for ministry purposes. And so he then spearheaded a process of getting a translation committee together. And so they specifically chose the name New English Translation because the acronym would be NET, Internet, because all of that fit
Hmm.
together with the thought that A, this is a translation that's just going to live on the internet. And
Uh,
B, they wanted it to be a translation that would be fully transparent in terms of all the translation choices that the committee made. So they kept a public running log of all the translation decisions they were making along the way and opened up the chat. And they received over 1 million comments from everyday Christians all the way up through scholars, biblical language scholars, about about the decisions they were making and taking those things under advisement. And then it was about 6 years ago that then they began to hear people wanted physical copies, and they had tried their hand at doing publishing work. But physically publishing a Bible is, as we talked very earlier, very complex work, and they didn't want
mm.
to stay in that business. So they came to Nelson, and we partnered with them, and so now we're doing all of the physical publishing of those Bibles. And
That's
the
great.
yeah, and so the cornerstone edition that most people think about is the full notes edition,
Mm.
and it was a typesetting beast to accomplish. But it has, rather than study notes that are theological, it has 63,000 translator notes. So as you're reading through, it's not trying to tell you what theological framework you need to see this verse through. Rather, it gives you the information about the actual why they translated this verse, this word, this phrase this way, and alternate renderings from other translations. And then there are other editions that are just text and reference Bibles. The one that you're giving away, the text, is more of a devotional style Bible that gives people a framework of when you come to the Bible and read it, how do you ask the right questions to understand a passage, and it walks you through that process. It's a great addition.
Yeah. So the NET translation philosophy, do you have any uh, knowledge about how that would fit in?
Yeah, I do. And so they sought to break the binary idea of
Mm.
you've got to be formal or you've got to be dynamic, that you have to decide on one of them.
Mm.
And they're one of the translation committees that never named the idea of what they're doing with optimal, formal,
Yeah.
complete, or whatever equivalents. They just decided that they wanted to be as accurate as possible with the translation. And so if that required a formal word by word type of translation in a particular verse, phrase, pericope, paragraph, section, they would go with that. But in the places where it made more sense to be more dynamic and to translate thought by thought and idea for idea, then they would move in that direction. And so, again, on all of the spectrums that people create to show where translations fit from dynamic to formal, the net normally sits at the center point or near the center point between what is really, really formal and what is really, really readable. And so it turns in it, so it becomes a translation that I find to be enjoyable to read, and I have a lot of confidence in its accuracy. And if I ever disagree with it, I can just look at the translator notes to see why they translated it the way they did, and then I can agree or disagree with that.
I like the fact that Nelson has that as one of its translations because it's just good complement to something like the New King James Version, which we've been talking about. The
Yeah.
NET is very modern sounding by
Mhm.
comparison, a lot more just your typical English. But those translator notes. So if anybody out there has never seen the NET translator notes, they do produce a full notes edition that Philip mentioned, and that's certainly worth looking at. Also, online you can get the translation notes for the NET, and what's great about them, it's not just like here's what we decided, but I like they spell out what the issue is. They actually explain here's why translators have to grapple with this text, which is great for so many of us who just we're not reading the original languages ourselves. So it's so good to understand, oh, that's why you have different choices when you read the different translations.
I've
So
had
the full
people
notes, go ahead.
I've had people that are that they don't have a seminary degree. This person's a businessman, they're an accountant, a plumber, a welder, or whatever, and they're like, "Well, I wouldn't know what to do with that." And my encouragement has been, if you'll spend 30 minutes with this Bible and look at the front matter, read that front matter, all of those front matter notes that people just whiz by, and when they get a study Bible, like go read that, and then you'll understand how all of these notes are constructed and what all of the symbols are for, and it will enhance your appreciation, one, of how translations get done, but then it's going to deepen your understanding and give you the tools to take your studies of the scripture into a different direction that maybe you never thought you could do before. It makes all of the language studies a lot more accessible for everybody.
So aside from the full notes edition, are there any other editions of the NET that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned a few of them. The one that you're giving away, the text, originally we envisioned it as a Bible just for teenagers, but as we worked with Michael and Haley DeMarco, they're the authors of all of the notes in it. It became evident that this is a Bible that could be used by anybody. The visual design is probably trends younger, but for people who are looking for a Bible that will just help give them a framework of how do I study the Bible, that's a great one. The second one I've mentioned already, the Abide Bible, it's available in both the New King James Version and Net, and just a beautiful read. And that's a beautiful full color Bible with all sorts of wonderful artwork in it as well. And then the Timeless Truths Bible that I mentioned, that has all of these voices from church history giving insight and commentary on every chapter of the Bible. And then, of course, with all of our translations that we publish, including the Net, there are just text Bibles that are thin line, large print, single column Bibles, double column Bibles. You can find the whole array of those at thomasnelsonbibles.com. So, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I am so appreciative of this conversation we've been able to have. I know people were really interested in hearing what you had to say, and you've given us great information. And I mean, just that one question that about the updating of the NKJV, that itself was worth everything, right? For a lot of the people who are listening. But a lot of great information, and it was really wonderful. I do want to thank the audience. I mean, it's just been a really consistent audience here, continuing to talk in the chat. I'm sorry. I actually have something I'm going to be getting to very soon, so I'm going to have to wrap things up here. But I want to thank the audience for your attention and participation as always. And also, especially our guest today, Philip Dacian. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Always fun to be with you, Tim, and appreciate everybody, your work that you've done, Tim, to encourage people to read the Bible, study the Bible, get another Bible. Let me just encourage all of you that are listening. We are really happy to serve you as Bible publishers, and I just want to encourage you in the mission of Christ. Let's make giving Bibles away great again. Uh,
Mm,
Buy an extra Bible and give it to a neighbor. Buy an extra Bible, give it to your grandkids, and let's continue this wondrous work that we have the opportunity to do of just making the Bible proliferated throughout our communities. Make sure that there's nobody in your city that doesn't have a Bible,
mm.
and just keep engaging the mission of Christ so that we can see more and more people come to salvation.
Amen. Amen. Praise God that we have publishers like Thomas Nelson to help make that happen. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. I'm going to let the audience go. Have a great day, everyone.